We're apparently getting Gilgamesh and Rin as future Collab characters, and I am shocked. Because Rin is not a servant, which not only makes it more difficult to design her kit and animations, but I didn't even think Type Moon would allow. And while I'm still very skeptical about the whole thing, it does make sense. The most obvious character to release would have been Lancer, but that runs into an issue of Hoyo's own making. The fact that there's no way they would ever do an all-male collab. If they didn't find a way to make Rin work, then it would have been Lancer, and then the second character would have to be Gilgamesh, since he's by far the most popular servant left. Honestly, he's in contention for just straight up most popular full stop. Fucker's in nearly every single spin-off out there. Which is why, even if Lancer's model is already made, if there can only be one guy, it just makes so much more sense to make and release Gilgamesh instead. Lancer is great and very popular, but not as much as Gilgamesh. There's a reason Gil's in everything and he isn't. Even personally, while I prefer Lancer and fucking love the guy as a character, I'm more excited for Gilgamesh to be added to the game. He's just so much flashier and expressive. His animations should just be on a different scale to what Lancer could have. You might be surprised they're still doing him though, since they've already taken inspiration from him for Mighty. But the similarities are pretty much only skin deep. Mighty appears like one specific uncommon look for Gil, but that's it. Gil's main classic look is still very different, with the full armour and short spiky hair. Their personalities are totally different. Mighty is a fighter, Gil, if anything, is known as the exact opposite. A fucking arrogant arsehole that always holds back and finds his opponents unworthy of his full strength. Mighty's power is immortality, perseverance, and self-control. Gil's is fucking money. Most importantly though, their animations and kits would just be completely different. Gil would stay back and launch weapons with Gate of Babylon and obliterate enemies with his reality warping ult. Nothing like the Berserker theme they went with for Mighty. So Gilgamesh makes sense to add, especially since, thanks to him being in fucking everything, he's just been featured heavily in the first season of Strange Fake. He's the most relevant and in the zeitgeist that he'll be for the foreseeable future. It simply makes more sense and will be more profitable to release him instead of Lancer. Even though they already have Lancer's model, like I said, it can't be Lancer alongside Gil because Hoyo would just never do that. And when limited to only female characters, the choice of second character becomes obvious. Or does it? Find out after you subscribe. Yeah, that's right, I'm not continuing until you do it. Yeah, that's right. Get down there, click the button. Don't make me do the YouTuber thing of showing you the statistics, because as a tiny channel, they are not pretty. So, go on, get in there. The only alternative woman, if they didn't get permission to release Rin, would have been Ryder, who is popular, but absolutely not in the upper echelon. To put it another way, it took FGO 8 years to make a 5-star version of her. FGO does kind of exist on a different timescale, but still. With Saber already in the game, Ryder would be the only female servant really left to release. There's also Media, Caster, but she's less popular, especially in Japan. And worse than that, her voice actress actually tragically died, making going back to that character a little sensitive, since she'd have to be recast. Making Rin as an icon of the franchise the obvious choice. The only problem with her and the other main heroine of Fate Stay Night is that they are just human. If you're confused why that could be an issue though, there's two main reasons. Creating a kit and especially cool animations for her could be very difficult since she doesn't really fight very much, and when she does, it's on a much smaller and less impactful scale since she doesn't have the power of a servant. Her attacks would only really suit a basic attack. There's not really anything amazing enough to be a skill or an ult. Of course, though, that's only if she attacks. It's not a problem that's hard to overcome if they just make her a support. For example, now that the genie is out of the bottle, she could be a character like Cyrene that only buffs Fate characters. That wouldn't be ideal though, since it would make her extremely niche. Unless you are a full Fate fan, that's probably quite useless for you. It requires you to have rolled Saber, Gilgamesh, or be committed enough to Archer to roll a support just for him. Perhaps for the second time if you already got Sparkle for him. It's not really very appealing to waifu-only players who might not really be large Fate fans or even fans of Fate at all, but just like Rin and her design. They could give her away for free and make Gilgamesh the banner exclusive character, but a free female character would be a first. So ideally they'd want to avoid making her specific to these few characters who might never come back or get any more support, so people feel comfortable rolling her. But the problem with that though is if she herself is going to be only temporary and not get reran, then it extremely limits both her strength and utility as a support. You can't have the most powerful support in the game completely unavailable after their release. Imagine if Tribby was never available again after her first banner. That would suck balls. On the flip side though, imagine if that were the case for Robin. Even though she's not very great now, imagine if you could never get the utility of her full team action advance ever again. Ideally, that problem could be easily solved by just not making her temporary and rerunning her, or leaving her banner up permanently. They have left Archer and Saber up for a full year after all, so maybe it's not as unrealistic as it sounds. The fact they have already done that, though, is an issue in itself. If they don't release these banners with an end date, or give one within a couple of patches of their release, there's basically no pressure to spend and pull now that we know they can be up for over a year. I know I will take my time a lot more in E6ing them this time, now that I know I can. Of course, the other difficulty in making her a permanently available part of the game leads into the second major problem, approval. The main reason I thought Rin might be an issue is because I wasn't sure if Type Moon themselves would allow it. They have for collabs with some other games, but I wasn't sure whether they would for a big story-focused, turn-based gacha game competitor when it's not something that's allowed in their own turn-based gacha game. Everything in FGO is subject to approval by Type Moon to make sure it fits the story and lore, and it has a lot of rules as a result. One of which is that only servants are playable. And so the game is filled with workarounds, based on established lore though, to give us characters like Eresh and Muramasa, servants who have taken a human as their vessel so that they can actually be summoned. Gods like Eresh and Ishtar are too powerful to simply be summoned as servants, so they've conveniently taken the body of one of our favourite characters so that they can be summoned and we can play them. It's kind of like a double whammy where we can get both a popular human character and some mythological character that we couldn't get otherwise. That's something that might not really work for Star Rail though, because if they weren't allowed to just use Rin, then that would have to be a Fate Grand Order collab, which opens up another whole can of worms. You go from a lack of a specific kind of character to far too many of all kinds. People would never shut up. They do it as an excuse to get Rin and the pseudo-servants in the game, but they're not even the most popular characters from the game. What about Morgan, Arjuna Alter, Jolter, Tez, Mash? They'd be getting asked for more collabs for all eternity. It would also be directly collabing with their competition. I don't think it matters, or they wouldn't have collabed with Fate at all, but imagining a collab that brought over Morgan and Tez, for example, it could kind of widen people's horizons in a way that harms Hoyo. I'll be real, the stories that they are from are so far and away better than anything that I've seen from Hoyo. And a lot of the best or most popular FGO characters are ones that Hoyo would never make. Characters who swear, fight, kill, or worse. I mean, Morgan was a literal Ice Queen villain that was kind of the big bad for Saber, the face of the franchise. There's just a lot less limits. Despite what I said about the game having a lot of rules, they only really apply to the game and not the writing and stories that create the characters and create a lot of the rules themselves. I'm coming back while editing because I want to belabor one of the examples. This is a playable character who has explicitly had countless different lovers, and the tragedy of her story is that she was cursed to literally consume them, despite being a good person with a deep desire to love and be loved. She's also explicitly not interested in the MC either, because part of it and her curse is that she's only into the strong. That's not to say she's the norm and wasn't still quite shocking in the context of the game, or that the game doesn't have a lot of ML with servants deeply in love with the MC, but it's mostly kept out of the main story and is only in events and everything where characters can get more goofy. And it's usually for a good reason, but I digress. So, if they weren't allowed to use Rin, Ishtar and Aresh wouldn't have been a good workaround either. But while FGO would be opening a can of worms, it's worth asking why they're not doing a collab with the part of Fate that is currently extremely relevant. Strange Fake, that literally just had its first season finish. It's what FGO itself is about to collab with, cause yeah, it's a very incestuous game when it comes to collabs. Again, because of those requirements for consistency and lore and everything, even though the stuff they come up with by themselves is far crazier than any other franchise they could collab with. And jokes are the deepest lore in that franchise. Strange Fake could seem like a great idea, allowing them to strike while the iron's hot and likely have an easier time getting permission to do anything they like in the name of promoting the anime. But it has pretty much all of the previous issues combined, just less severely. Like FGO, it opens up more popular characters than they can feasibly do, and the most popular characters are still guys like, again, Gilgamesh. So it simply makes the most sense to just release Rin by whatever means necessary. The only reason not to would be if they simply weren't allowed. But as I've thought about all this so much, I've realised that it's completely clear that what we've got is no ordinary collab with simple one-off permissions, and might actually have been a multi-year deal from the beginning to have maybe loads of collabs and get just about all of the main Fate Stay Night characters into the game. The banners having lasted this long already is so weird that it sent me down a whole nother rabbit hole of thinking about next year and the future and when, if ever, we might actually get Lancers. But I'll be saving all of that for another video, once we actually know that there is another collab happening. So subscribe if you want to hear that. I'd usually just make it all one video, but I've learned that it's a lot better to make several smaller videos than one big one, like I personally prefer. I did that on my other channel with my huge video explaining the entirety of Fate, and the length has seemed to make it a lot less successful than if I'd just explained the basics, where to start, and all the funny, weird spin-offs in separate videos. But if you want to prove me wrong and hear me yap a lot more about Fate, you can go check that out. Until hopefully next time, bye.